Hi and welcome to Study Room. I am Pratyaksha, your biology teacher, and today I'll be teaching you chapter 3 of biology, diversity in living organisms. Now we have already learned about cells. That cell is the fundamental unit of life, all right? And we have already learned about tissues, the different nature of tissues, the different types of tissues, and how are tissues arranged in plants as well as animals. In this chapter, on the basis of the arrangement of cells, tissues, and various other factors, we'll be determining and we'll be assessing that how living organisms they are classified into various groups, all right, and what is the huge criterion, what is the different criterion on which these living organisms they are divided, and we'll be assessing the diversity in living organisms. Now this is a very lengthy chapter, but we'll study each part bit by bit and we'll understand that why the need of classification is important and how living organisms are classified. So let's get started with this chapter. There is a need for a system of classification. Since there is a variety in living beings, be it in plants, be it in animals, and also be it in other microscopic organisms that we cannot even see with our naked eye, that we cannot even perceive. All right, and we humans need to understand that which kind of plants are there and how many types of plants are there or how many types of animals are there and what are the bases on which these set of animals is different from say the other set. All right, and this assessment, this classification is important, the study is important so that we can get to know the diversity around us. We can study the different species, the different varieties of plants and animals and other organisms that are there around us so that we can know our earth and we can know the organisms that inhabit earth more and more meticulously. All right, so the earth is full of organisms of various shapes and sizes. That is, the earth has a diverse category of creatures, and the largest phylum of animal kingdom alone contains over 1 million species. Now we will be learning in this chapter that different creatures, they are categorized, they are classified, they are divided on the basis of some similarities, right? On the basis of some similarities. Animals and plants, they are different from each other, right? But what are the similarities that say, help us determine that all the birds, they are different from say all lions, right? Or all lions are different say from monkeys. Okay, so there are various kind of animals, all right, some that we don't even know the name of. Okay, because most animals that are there in India, they may not be found in other places, and those animals that are there in other places, they may not be found in India. All right, so to assess this diversity, there is a need for a system of classification so that wherever we are, irrespective of our place, we understand the nature of these organisms, and that may help us to ascertain other features and other importance that these animals or these creatures they hold in maintaining the ecological balance of nature. Okay. So, because of the huge diversity in living organisms, it becomes a very difficult task to classify each of them. All right. So, if you say that all the animals that are there, we human beings, we are also animals, right? So, you cannot say that all human beings, they are similar to say lions, because lions are also animals, or monkeys, or even birds, because birds are also animals, right? So there must be some criteria, right? There must be some classification. There must be some basis, some grounds. All right. And beholding, perceiving these grounds, perceiving this basis, we are able to classify that no, animals such as human beings, they are different from lions because these are the differences. All right. So in order for us to perceive organisms around us in a more easier way, in a more comprehensive way, in a more meticulous way, we need to categorize, okay? We need to categorize, we need to divide, all right? So that we are able to learn the similarities and we are able to understand the dissimilarities, all right? And therefore, there is a classification necessary. This classification is done on the basis of groups, and there are different subgroups, and thus the system of classification started. So we realized that we cannot put every kind of animal into one group, or we cannot put every kind of even bacteria or even fungi, protista. We'll be learning about all these, right? We cannot put them into one broader category and just leave it at that. Okay, there is some more division necessary, some further classification is required so that an individual species may be understood in a more comprehensive way. Okay. First of all, Greek thinker Aristotle, he was the first one to come up with, that a classification is necessary, and he divided animals or plants. He divided basically living organisms on the basis of where they were living. All right, either they were living on either they were living on, say, trees, or either they were living on land, or either they were living in water. Okay, so aquatic or terrestrial. This was a simple way of looking at life, but this was misleading. All right, because there must be various type of creatures that may be living on land. There may be various types of creatures that may be living on both land as well as water. Suppose there are plants, all right, and there are aquatic plants and there are terrestrial plants. But also there are some kind of animals that they live either on land or also in water. Okay, so we just cannot say that animals, birds, since they are air dwellers, or they live on trees, so just categorize them as one kind. But what about koalas? They also, that they do come down, but mostly they live on eucalyptus trees. All right, so you cannot just qualify them into that on that basis, that where they are living, where they are propagating their lifestyle. That cannot be a basis. That is misleading. All right, some water dwellers, they may be living on land, some land dwellers, they may also be living in water. All right, for example, there are some plants that they live on land, but in order to reproduce, in order to perpetuate their livelihood, in order to perpetuate their further beings, they take the help of water. So how will you able to classify them? All right. Similarly, plants, there are soft stems, there are woody stems, there are several shrubs, but this cannot. This is very a simple sort of category, right? This is very vague. Okay, this is very vague. This is very misleading. There has to be some concrete, basis, some concrete grounds on the basis of which you can say that yes, soft stems differ from hard stems, because these are the scientific or proven criteria on which we can divide, or on which we can classify. So the system of classification of Aristotle, that was misleading. Okay, the drawback was that the simplest drawback was that and plants, they can both be found in land as well as sea, and there are very small animals like seahorses and very large animals like whales. You cannot categorize them on the basis of their sizes as well. All right, so therefore this was not a good basis of classification, and we needed some other basis, some other criteria on which we can classify organisms. Why do we classify organisms? We classify organisms so that their understanding is easier, so that we can assess them in a better way. All right, we can understand them, we can comprehend them. Okay, and thus that can make our lives easier as well. We are classifying organisms, we are dividing organisms so that they can be put into distinct groups as well as subgroups. Okay, and this classification, this helps us in order to comprehend them, this helps us in order to understand them. Okay, give 3 examples of the range of variations that you see in life forms around you. Now, you can take locomotion to be one kind of example. All right, some sort of range of variation. This is not a very solid basis of classification, but you may take it as an example. You may take it as a range of variation that is here mentioned in the question. So plants, they do not locomote, right? They are stationary at their places. All right, whereas animals, they do. Okay, and other range of variation, you can say lifespan, that there are some flies or some insects that live only for several days, they are evanescent. All right, and there are some other say insects or some other creatures that may live up to say even 100 years. Okay, so lifespan can be a criteria. Okay, then what else? What else can you think of? Other range of criteria, other range of variation could also be color, okay, or some other feature, some other characteristic that differentiate one set of organisms from other. Like if you're talking about feature, we may say that animals, they have limbs, okay, or fishes, they have fins, whereas birds, they have wings, okay, and plants, they do not have limbs, all right, they have roots and stems, they are different organs, but they are not limbs, since they do not require limbs for any kind of locomotion. Okay, or color, that why plants are green in color, because they have chlorophyll, we know that, but that could be taken as a range of variation, right? That plants, some plants, they are green, some leaves, they are yellow. Okay, so these all could be taken as range of variations that we see in life forms, and these are very superficial categories, all right. These are very valid categories, at least more firmer than what Aristotle thought of. But then again, these are superficial categories. We can just use these as cues in order to classify some sort of range of variations in different organisms. Okay, but there has to be some basic, some concrete ideas on the basis of which we are able to classify organisms distinctly. So we'll learn about that in the next part. So starting now, what is the basis of classification? Now we'll be learning about those concrete, distinct criterias on which organisms, be it plants, be it animals, or be it microscopic organisms, or even mosses, even fungi, how we are dividing them, on what basis, on what grounds we are classifying them. All right, we have seen that why a classification is necessary. Now we'll be learning that what are these grounds, okay? What are these grounds? So, on the basis of classification, we know that there has to be some characteristic, some feature that are similar in, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of organisms in order to club them into one category. All right, and these ways, these facts, there may be some detail of appearance, there may be some function, there even may be some behavior. So, in other words, they could be form and function. Okay, so characteristic is a particular feature or a particular function that may be related to its structure, that may be related to its appearance, or more oftenly can be related to its function. Like most of us have 5 fingers on each hand, all right, most of us. So this is a characteristic. It is the fact that we can run, we can locomote from one place to another, whereas trees, as I had told you previously, that they cannot. So locomotion can be taken as say a characteristic, as a function, all right, as a behavior. Nowadays, we look at many interrelated characteristics, and how do we understand this interrelated feature? We understand this from the nature of cell in order to classify all living organisms. Nature of cell. By nature of cell means what is the structure? Like you have learned cells and you have learned tissues, right? So you know that there are some creatures, microscopic creatures that are able to survive just on one cell. That means they are unicellular. Okay, and there are some organisms that are multicellular. All right, so that there are some features, there are some say classifications, some body organization that are there, and this structure of cell, be it related to the cell wall or the cell membrane, or be it how the bodily organization is, whether it is unicellular or whether it is multicellular, this can be taken as a concrete criteria to classify organisms. Why? Because this is looking at microscopic level, not going at the macros, but looking at the micros. All right, so we are not looking on we are not looking on we are not looking at superficial characteristics, rather we are delving deep into the microscopic characteristics, so that we can say that, since human beings, they're also multicellular, and say a monkey is also multicellular, So these can be taken as animals, and some microscopic creatures such as bacteria, they are unicellular, so we cannot call them animals. They will be classified into another group. Alright, so this is the most simplest and the most efficient way in which we can classify organisms. Alright, the other thing which is actually related to the nature of the cell is presence or absence of nucleus. This, if you may recall, the previous chapters, we have already learned about this prokaryotes and eukaryotes. We know that prokaryotes are those organisms that do not have membrane-bound organelles, all right, and that do not have a well-defined nucleus. These are prokaryotes, and eukaryotes are those organisms that have membrane-bound organelles and they have a well-defined nucleus or even a nucleolus. All right, so presence of nucleus and membrane-bound organelles, that gives better efficiency. So you can say that prokaryotes, they are the primitive sort of those organisms having prokaryotes are the primitive organisms. Means that they do not have very well differentiated or very well defined features. Okay, whereas eukaryotes, they are more advanced, all right, or they are more complex even, because they have more defined characteristic. They have more defined nucleus, they have membrane bound organelles, so complications are increasing, all right, and obviously there has to be some succession. And we know that that the creatures that are primitive, from those organisms we are climbing up the ladder to more complex. So what I mean to say is that we are climbing up the ladder from the most simple organisms to the most complex. Okay, most simple. What is the most simple? Simple characteristics, simple classification, that could be that animals that have no well-defined nucleus, okay, no membrane-bound organelles. So there are no complications, all right. There are no added structures, there are no added specifications, added features, added characteristics of that particular organism. So it is simple or it is primitive, okay. And as we work towards our way towards the advanced or the complex category, the complications increase, all right, the structures increase, membranes are added, or things are getting more distinct, more well defined, okay. So another basis is on the nature of the cell, that is prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Another basis on which we can classify the number of cells in an organism, that I already discussed you while I was just introducing you about this concept of the nature of cell, is that unicellular and multicellular. So we know from the previous two chapters that we have learned here, that some cells, some organisms, they are able to survive on the basis of one single cell, they are unicellular, while there are other organisms that have more than one cell. All right, so those organisms, those multi-celled organisms, could even limit themselves till the tissue level. That means there are more than one cell, but the complication is just there till the tissue level. That means no organs are formed. Okay, moving up, we can also have we can also have organisms that from the tissue, organs have developed. So in those organisms, we have cells, we have tissues, and we also have organs. Okay, and then again, moving up, some further most complex organisms. In those organisms, we will witness that we are having a full organ system. Okay, so this is the classification on the basis of number of cells, simple to complex, unicellular to multicellular, either at the cellular level, either at the tissue level, either at the organ level, or at the organ system level. Okay, then importantly, we come to the mode of nutrition. What is the mode of nutrition? All right, that means whether creatures, whether those organisms, they are producing their own food or whether they are depending upon others. All right, so plants, they have this pigment chlorophyll that you're very familiar with, that helps the plants in photosynthesis. That is, they utilize sun, they utilize water, and they utilize carbon dioxide, and they process and they manufacture food. They process and manufacture food on the basis of this pigment, chlorophyll. So all green plants, they are producing their own food, means they are autotrophs. Auto means self. So they are self-producing food. They are not dependent on other creatures. A plant produces its own food and utilizes that food for its for its perpetual, for its subsistence, all right. Whereas it also provides other creatures food, and those creatures fall under the category of heterotrophs, means they're dependent on other organisms for food. That could be either plants, or that could be or animals. Okay, so all animals, fungi, and certain bacteria and protozoa, they belong to this group. So I know that I'm using terms like fungi or bacteria, or so we will be coming to a broader classification, and we will be learning that why I'm calling why I am dividing fungi from animals, what is the criteria, what is the basis. We'll be learning all of that. But first, let's learn that what is the basis of classification. So we know that there is a nature of cells, prokaryotes or eukaryotes, the number of cells, unicellular or multicellular, and now we have seen the mode of nutrition. In multicellular organisms, which are small like Hydra, particular groups of cells are assigned a particular function, but larger organisms, we have organ, or either we have organ system. So this, I have already explained you that the body organization, that could either that could just be limited at the cellular level, or that could propagate further and get limited to the tissue level, or further propagation organ level, and finally we have the organ system level. Okay, so this is the basis of this body organization. All right, that how much complex that organism is, how much till what limit that organism is, can be classified up to, okay, in order to assess that how the bodily functions are being propagated inside it. Okay, so you have over here the level of organization that I have already drawn over here. Cell, you have tissue, you have the organ system, and the organ system already, of course, that leads to organism, a whole multicellular organism. These characteristics of body design are used for classification of plants, and the characteristics that we are using to differentiate plants would obviously be different from animals. Okay, because the basic designs are different. All right, we know that there are some cellular level differences, like plants have cell wall, animals only have cell membrane. Okay, then plants, they produce their own food, they make their own food, they're autotrophs, and animals, they they acquire it from other living organisms, either from plants or from other animals. So these basic designs, these basic features, this allow us to categorize, to assess, and to further study these organisms separately. Okay, so these are some basic superficial, those range of variations, if you recall it, and these are being used to to assess these organisms separately, to make further subgroups rather than making one larger broad group. So we are learning over here that how this say you can say the ladder. I won't use exactly this term ladder, but just for the sake of simplification, let's just say that what ladders you have to climb down, or you have to climb up, in order to understand that how a classification is being processed. Okay, so plants and animals, they have some very broad range differences, and those broad range differences, those basic designs allow us to study them, to assess them separately. Okay, and in that separate assessment, we can further study about the characteristics that are similar, or the characteristics that are different. Which do you think is a more basic characteristic for classifying organisms, the place where they live or the kind of cells? We know, we have already seen this, the kind of cells they are made of, that would be the more basic classification for organism. That is because this category is often misleading, it is vague, it is more than superficial. Okay, but the other category, the kind of cells they are made of, whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic, this nature of cell, this provides us a more firmer basis, firmer ground on which we can distinguish, or on which we can assess that why two different organisms, they are not similar, or why two different organisms, they are similar. The clubbing becomes more efficient, and the clubbing becomes more scientific. Okay, so the clubbing is efficient, and the clubbing is as well scientific. Okay. What is the primary characteristic on which the broad division of organisms is made? Okay, so the primary characteristic, we know it is the nature of the cell. We have just again learned this in the previous question. Nature of the cell means whether they are prokaryotes or whether they are eukaryotes. The other nature of cell could be that whether they are unicellular, okay, or multicellular. Okay, so this is this is the primary characteristic, the nature of the cell on which the broad division of organisms is made. Last question over here: on what basis are plants and animals put into different categories? So some basic features that we have learned already, right? That plants, they are plants, they are autotrophs, means they produce their own food. Okay, and animals, they are heterotrophs, means they depend either on plants for their food or on other animals. All right, and we also know that plants, they have the presence of cell walls. Okay, whereas animals, they have no cell wall, they only have the cell membrane. Okay, so these could be the broader categories on which we are segregating, on which we are separating plants and animals, and we are putting them into different categories. So their further subdivisions, their further subgroups could be understood separately. All right, because since all plants are autotrophs and since all animals are heterotrophs, so no matter how much classification the plant category goes into or the animal category goes into, you cannot compare. Comparisons, you cannot put them together, you cannot club them together into one category. They would always be separate. Okay, so on the basis of these very simple characteristic, we can assess that plants, they are different from animals, and hence they can be put into different categories.